This is Motovore. I'm Tushar, and you'll have to excuse my Mr. Magoo type face because there's so much light here. We're at the Sambhar salt flats in Rajasthan, and today we're driving that, which is the Ford Freestyle petrol. A lot of India's salt actually comes from the Sambhar region, and a significant percentage of that salt is actually up my nose, in my teeth and things like that. So we've had to have a change in location. We're back at the hotel now. We've driven the car almost 200 kilometers today. Let's take a closer look. If your first impression of the Freestyle is that, oh, that's a Figo, well, you're not entirely wrong. That is based on the Figo hatchback, except I'm going to use an overused cliche here. It looks like the Figo went to the gym, but not just any gym, not wo muscle wala gym, not the crazy crossfitters gym. They basically went to Pilates and aerial yoga, and they came up with that. What I mean by that is that it's a lot more subtle in terms of the visual stuff they've done with the car than, say, an Etios Cross or a Fiat Aventura, or it's actually more in line with the Cross Polo. There's a little bit of plastic cladding, and there is a little bit more in terms of significant updates to the car. You now have 190 millimeters of ground clearance. There's a new bumper with new black trim around the fog lamps. You now have roof rails, and these are not ornamental. You can actually hold 50 kilos of weight, which means you'll carry 2 bikes easily. But the most significant change in the Freestyle over the Figo is the new Dragon Series 1.2 litre 3-cylinder petrol motor. It makes 96 PS and 120 Newton meters of torque. So that puts it on the upper end of what you can expect from this class of vehicle. So who's the Freestyle for? Well, Ford seems to have their demographic pretty narrowly sort of defined. I'm not sure if it's narrow or it's just millennial, but let me read out from notes. I love taking notes of marketing speak. So it's essentially for people who have fewer constraints to balance, which essentially means young, single, maybe just married, no kids importantly. I think people are staying single longer, they have higher salaries. A quarter of the customers in India apparently want SUVs, but a lot of those customers don't necessarily have the funds to buy SUVs, and they end up compromising with premium hatches. So the Freestyle is basically supposed to be that middle ground. It's supposed to slot in below the EcoSport. So if you want an EcoSport but can't really afford one, and you'd probably end up going with a Figo hatchback or some other premium hatchback, then the Freestyle is for you. The specific designation that they've given to this demographic, their target customer, is experience everything, regret nothing. So the long and the short of it is that Ford is finally reaching out to the millennial audience, people who are essentially adult impersonators, who have some money but not enough to get you to an SUV class vehicle. So the compromise is this, and I think it's a pretty good compromise, because unlike a lot of the products in this category, I could name the Etios Cross, the Cross Polo, the Fiat Aventura, the Honda WRV. I think there's at least one more apart from this one. All of them are essentially gussied up hatchbacks. They've got a little bit of butch stuff, a little bit of plastic cladding to make them look like SUVs, but they don't really have any significant features that you could consider worthy of an SUV. This one, a little bit different. Let's talk about the interior a little bit. So Ford has chosen a dual tone interior for the Freestyle. You've got this brown and black situation around me, and it looks okay on the surface, but unfortunately it doesn't feel very okay. It feels a bit cheapish. There's a lot of hollow feeling plastics all over the place, and I think that's feedback that Ford has generally got from other people. What is really good though is the 6.5-inch touchscreen that they've carried over from the EcoSport. The EcoSport also gets, I think, an 8-inch model on the top spec variant, but this is the 6.5, which is across most variants, Ford says. So I suppose the base variant will not have it, but otherwise you've got this unit, and it is by far the best touchscreen entertainment system that I've used for quite some time, bar none, including higher end luxury cars. It's quick, it's responsive, the capacitive quality is excellent, the touch quality, the feel is excellent. Android Auto and CarPlay, Apple CarPlay work flawlessly almost every time. The Bluetooth pairing is one of the fastest I've ever seen. It's just great. I don't know why other manufacturers can't get it right like Ford can. They've done really well, which is to say that they've made up for the horrible center console that they had in the previous Figo. The last Figo I drove was the Figo S, and I'm going to reuse my joke. Don't tell me you don't do it. But the previous Figo, the one that I drove was the Figo S, actually has a center console with an infotainment screen that is smaller than some laser printers in the 90s. Even their AC display is larger than their infotainment display. That thankfully is no longer the case with the Freestyle, the 6.5 touchscreen, top notch. In terms of features, you also get a parking camera, you get push button, and you get automatic climate control. Good stuff. So on to how it drives. Of course, the party trick is the new motor. It's the Dragon series 3-cylinder petrol motor. It's basically a downsized version of the 1.5 litre that we saw in the new EcoSport. I personally did not like the petrol engine in the new EcoSport. This one is a little bit better, and I think primarily that's down to the fact that it doesn't lose a great deal and you're putting it into a lighter car. So the response is a little bit better. What I did like is that it's actually quite quiet. It kind of gives you the sense, and the EcoSport does the same, it kind of gives you the sense of early Marutis when they started with the 3-cylinder motor. But it's really quiet, surprisingly so for a 3-cylinder motor. 96 PS, 120 Newton meters of torque, which puts it, like I said, on the top level of this class of vehicle. But it doesn't play out exactly as you would expect. 120 Nm and almost 100 horsepower should feel nippy and quick. It doesn't. It feels more tuned to city use, in that you can lug a higher gear when typically you would kick down to second gear. You can probably be in third with this vehicle, which makes it comfortable and convenient to drive around the city, and that's nice. Unfortunately, that extra torque and horsepower doesn't really come into play when you're trying to overtake vehicles and trucks and things like that out on the highway. You've still got to mash it. You'll still eventually get a little bit frustrated and tend to shift down. The shifting, however, is nice. It's a all new 5-speed gearbox which they're using in the petrol and the diesel. It feels very slick. It's nice to use. It's nice in the city. On the highway, there are better cars. Probably this car in the diesel variant will be better on the highway. Now let's talk about the stuff that makes this more SUV and less hatchback. Now, Ford tells us that this is the first vehicle of its class that has active rollover protection. Now, this is an electronic system. What it essentially does is, when you're acting all crazy and weaving through mud like we were today, there is a tendency of a tall vehicle to sort of roll a little bit too much and possibly roll over, and you don't want that. So what this system does is it reduces the torque coming from the engine, and just like traction control, it brakes the appropriate wheel to ensure that your roll essentially is controlled. You could misbehave with it, but generally it reins it in and it controls it, and it makes sure that you don't roll over and die. And I think that's a good thing. Along with the 190 mm of ground clearance, which is also one of the higher ones in this segment, you certainly can't get a hatchback with 190 mm, I think, is a new tune for the suspension, and I think that pretty much plays out. This suspension is very comfortable. It's softer than what you'd get on a Figo hatchback. Obviously it's higher. We went through some fairly rough roads today, and no problems, no crashiness. Only on the most extreme segments of road will you actually notice a little bit of crash, but really good for what we experienced today. Also, another segment first is hill hold control. So if you're a newbie driver or just a bad driver and don't have that whole capability with the handbrake, and you're on a hill, tend to roll back, this one will not let you do that, saving you potentially bodily harm from the people you run into at the back. Still more features. Dual airbags standard across all variants. Great that Ford is taking safety that seriously. This one, the one that we've been driving, is actually 6 airbags. Ford is being very transparent with their service, because they're saying this one will cost 41 paise per kilometer to service over 1 lakh kilometers, which is pretty cheap. They actually gave us a number. They said this one will cost less than 6,000 rupees for the first year's service. Sounds pretty cheap to me. Certainly cheaper than my car. So I'm going to run down a few other things that caught my eye. The mirrors, the side mirrors there, the ORVMs are a little bit small. I found myself actually pushing them all the way out to get a wider view and actually get a decent view of the road behind me. The ride is really comfortable. I think they've done a good job with the suspension. The retuned suspension is not just lip service, it is retuned. It works well. The AC is pretty strong. We are in Rajasthan and temperatures were between 40 and 50 degrees depending on where you were during the daytime. AC worked a treat, really good. Clutch is very light, so if you're used to a European car and heavy clutches, this will be a little bit of an adjustment, but I think a light clutch is generally considered pretty good. The Android Auto and the touchscreen navigation system, the touchscreen infotainment system, flawless, love it. Spoke at length about it, good stuff. There's a lot of rear legroom, at least for me, and this is something that you might have differing opinions from other journalists. I'm 5'9" and I adjusted my driving position, and the person sitting behind me is 6 foot tall, and he was comfortable and still had knee room, which I think that's pretty decent legroom. And one downside that I can think of overall, and I mentioned it before, is ultimately, even though they've tried to make things look a little bit upmarket with that dual tone interior, ultimately the plastic choices are a little bit cheap and you can feel it. Thank you for watching this review. Shit, shave, shower, like, subscribe, share, this time in any order you like. If you'd like to contribute to the Make Tushar Rich campaign, do message me and I will send you my bank details.